Hello everyone and welcome to the analysis of Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Now Rabindranath Tagore, as we know, was alive from 1861 to 1941. He was born in Calcutta, which is now known as Kolkata, but he was not only a poet, he was a writer, a composer, a painter and even a philosopher. This poem, that is Where the Mind is Without Fear, was originally written in Bengali and it was written under the title of Prarthana. It was later translated by Rabindranath Tagore himself, and it was part of a famous anthology of poems, which was actually a Nobel Prize winning anthology known as Gitanjali, as you must have heard already. So, this poem was a part of Gitanjali and is one of the most famous works of Rabindranath Tagore. Now, this poem is profoundly sensitive. In fact, all the poems of Gitanjali are deep, sensitive, fresh, and they are made of beautiful verses. It was originally written in Bengali, like I said, and it was subsequently translated into English by Rabindranath Tagore himself. He was the first non-European ever to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. And you must know by now that Rabindranath Tagore's poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, has a little bit of a backstory. That is, why is he writing this poem called Where the Mind is Without Fear? Well, if you think about the time when the poem was written, at that time, India was still under British rule. And at that time, we were just trying to get freedom from this colonization, from the British rule. So he's sort of trying to write down what freedom truly means. That not only must we get political freedom from these colonizers, so not only do we want the British to go away, but we want true freedom. And he's sort of writing down what true freedom really means. So let's begin and read the poem. Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Now, the first thing that he says about what he wants his country, India, to be. So, let me recap. Where the mind is without fear is actually a contemplation of all the things that he wants India to be. So, he's writing down all these things that he thinks is what is meant by true freedom. So he's saying that, look, he's thinking, he's having this vision that one day India will have all these things and we are going to see what are the things that he wants in this India. So he's trying to create a utopian society. He's trying to write down about a utopian society, and utopia means a perfect world. So he's writing down these things that he wants in India for perfect freedom. And the first one is that the mind should be without fear and that the head should be held high. Now, what does that mean? It means that we should be able to live in a country where no one should be afraid of saying what they have in their mind. You should not be scared to say what is in your head, to say your thoughts out loud, to believe what you want to believe. You shouldn't be afraid that someone will come and hit you or kill you because of something you believe or because of something you think. That's the kind of country Rabindranath Tagore says that he wants India to be in the future. And then he says that your head should be held high. You should always be able to walk on the road without being afraid of what you think and what you believe. And this is one of the properties that Rabindranath Tagore wants for India. And as you can see, this is a partial sentence. Partial sentence because it begins with the word where. So you're thinking, what is happening with this sentence? In fact, the first 9 lines of the poem are all partial sentences. And in the last line of the poem, as you will see, he will resolve these sentences and finish it. But for now, let's move on to the next sentence. The next line of the poem says, where knowledge is free. So this is really important because in Rabindranath Tagore's utopian India, in his perfect vision of India, knowledge is free. And why does he want knowledge to be free? Because he knows that education and learning can help people come out from the darkness of the superstitions and the beliefs and the wrong things that their heads are messed up into. So he wants knowledge to be free. He wants the poor and the rich and the men and the women and all communities, all of them, to have the same access to knowledge. It shouldn't be that the rich only get to be educated, that only the boys get to go to school. He doesn't want that. He wants knowledge for everyone because he knows that everyone deserves an opportunity to make their lives better, and being knowledgeable will help us come out of these wrong customs and wrong ideas that we have been stuck for so long. So he says that knowledge should be free. Everyone should have access to knowledge. Next he says, where the world has not been broken up into fragments. And he says that, see, I'm thinking of this India and I'm thinking of this country where the world, where the society is not broken up into fragments. So why is he saying that the world is broken up into fragments? Broken up into fragments means that people are not united. They're not standing together. They are divided. And why are they divided? They are divided and it's broken up into fragments because of narrow domestic walls. So he says that where the world has not been broken up into fragments or small pieces by narrow domestic walls. And what are these walls? These walls here signifies the division on the basis of caste, creed, religion, sex, and age. All these divisions, all this discrimination should no longer be there. All these prejudices in Indian society should go away. He calls these divisions of class and creed and religion, he calls them narrow domestic walls, because it is these narrow thoughts. Narrow thoughts means thoughts which are not good. These narrow thoughts are the reason why our society is not progressing. So he calls these narrow thoughts as narrow domestic walls. And because of these narrow domestic walls, our world has broken up into fragments. We are in pieces. We are not united. We don't love each other. We don't help each other. And he wants the perfect India to have no such walls, and he wants us all to be united. So he wants to break such narrow domestic walls. Next, he says, what does he want in his perfect India? He wants that in perfect India, there shouldn't be any lies. He says, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection. So where words come out from the depth of truth. Now, these are very complex lines. So far, all the lines were very straightforward, very simple to understand. Now, these two are really complex lines. They are sort of philosophical. He's saying that every word that comes out of anybody's mouth in the perfect India should be truth. Now, I know this is a very controversial topic. Everyone will not agree. But in Tagore's idea of a perfect India, truth is absolutely necessary. And therefore, he says that everyone must speak the truth in a perfect India. Nobody should lie, and tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection. Now, this is a wonderful, wonderful saying. He's saying that in the perfect India, hard work will always give you a reward. So, tireless striving here refers to doing hard work, to making laborious efforts towards your goal or towards whatever you want to achieve. So, here, towards perfection actually means towards your goal, whatever you want. So, he's saying in the perfect kind of country, in the right kind of country, hard work must always pay the person in good reward. And therefore, he's saying that that's the kind of country India should be, that whenever someone does hard work, that person should be appreciated and rewarded. And that's one of the properties or positive attributes that Tagore wants to have in his perfect vision of India. So here, tireless striving is continuous, laborious efforts and struggle, stretches its arms, aims at achieving a goal. So here again, like I said, whenever people work hard, they must be able to get what they want. That's the kind of ideas that should be propagated in a perfect India, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. Now, this is a deep, deep two lines. In this line, he is comparing the clear stream of reason. Clear stream. Now, stream, you know, is water. He is comparing a stream of water to logical thinking or rational thinking. So, he's saying that rational thinking and logical thinking is just like a clear stream of water. And he's saying that when you think rationally and when you think logically, I hope you will always be able to go in this path of logic and rational thinking and not stop somewhere and get stopped by this dead habit. So, he's saying that I hope you never lose your way. That is, I hope you never get lost in such a country because of dead habits. So, here he is comparing the desert sand. Now, why desert? Because in a desert, plants don't grow. Beautiful things like trees don't grow. So, it's a dead desert sand, and he's comparing that to dead habits. What are dead habits? Dead habits are superstitions and age-old customs and beliefs that cause suffering and pain to one community or another. All these dead traditions, superstitions, customs, they must all go away. So Tagore says that in a perfect India, people must be willing to change. They must be willing to give up these dead habits, embrace change, give up all these bad customs, traditions and superstitions, and they should let their logical thinking, their rational thinking guide the way, because it's like a clear stream. It's easy, it's clean. They should let their rational thinking guide the way and never be caught up in the desert sand, never become dead like the dead habits and move on and progress from these prejudices. And that's what he means in this line. So here stream, like I said, is a small narrow river. Here you have also dreary, which means dull. And finally, dead habit means old traditional rituals and customs that are harmful. Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action. And finally, now we see who he's talking to. He's saying all these lines to thee, which is thee here refers to God. And so he's saying, where the mind is led forward by thee, that in my country, in my vision of a perfect India, all of these minds, that is, all of these people will be guided by God, that is thee. He's talking to God directly, and he's saying that you must guide my country forward with your guidance into ever widening thought and action. He's saying that in a perfect India, in a utopian India, there should always be room for the mind to expand, for people to learn, for people to grow, to come out of all that is bad and come into light from darkness. So ever widening, that is ever expanding thought and action. So thee here is you, but he's referring to God, and thee stands for you in old archaic English. And ever widening, of course, means always broadening one's outlook, always broadening one's perspective. So ever widening thought and action is a country where a person's point of view always, that's his perspective, always increases. And finally, into that heaven of freedom, let my country awake. So into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. And in the final line, like I told you before, he completes all the partial sentences. So where this happens, this happens, this happens. But what does he want where this happens? He wants into that heaven of freedom to his country to awake. So finally, he completes his poem by saying that that's a heaven of freedom. That's true freedom, where people can say what they feel like without being afraid, where knowledge is free, where rich and poor are not discriminated against, where men and women work together and they are not discriminated against on the basis of gender, religion, community, or caste. In such a country, there would be true freedom, not just political freedom, but true freedom. And that is the heaven of freedom. And in such a heaven of freedom, my Father, he calls out to God and he says, let my country awake, where he's saying that please lift my country into this beautiful, beautiful heaven of freedom so I can get the perfect vision for India. So you can see that he is hoping for more than just political freedom from his country. He's hoping for cultural freedom. He's hoping for freedom from prejudices, from age-old customs and beliefs. And that is the beautiful, beautiful message of Rabindranath Tagore for his country to come into a condition of total freedom of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds while respecting those of others. So this completes our line-by-line analysis of Where the Mind is Without Fear. Let's quickly summarize all the figures of speech in this poem. First, we have in the first line, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. It is alliteration where the sound of the letter W, where, without, and the sound of the letter H, head, high, held, is repeated for poetic effect. It is also a synecdoche because obviously it is not the mind and the head alone, but the citizen as a whole that should be fearless. It is a citizen as a whole that should not be afraid. So mind and head are used to represent a whole, that is the citizen. So that's a synecdoche. You have also where the world has not been broken up into fragments. It is an alliteration because the sound of the letter W, where, world, and broken, bin. So the sound of the letter B is also repeated for poetic effect. That's alliteration. Then by narrow domestic walls, that's a metaphor where walls are indirectly compared to the divisions of class, caste, community in society. So they are comparing these divisions in society to narrow domestic walls. So that's a metaphor. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, it's personification because inanimate object striving is given the human quality of stretching its arms and is given the human quality of being tireless. So these human qualities are given to striving and therefore this is a personification. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way. So this is also personification because the clear stream of reason has been given the human quality of losing its way, that is of being lost. And of course, it's not the stream of reason that can be lost. So it's given a human quality of being lost and therefore it's personification. But it's also a metaphor because here there is an indirect comparison made between the clarity of thought and that of a stream. So there is a comparison. Instead of saying that the thought is clear, he's comparing it to a stream of water, which is a clear stream of water. So that's a metaphor. into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. So that's alliteration, as you can see, sound of the letter D, dreary, desert, dead, repeated for poetic effect. It's also a metaphor because there is an indirect comparison made between habit, that's a dead habit, and the desert sand, right? So therefore, that's also a metaphor. Where the mind is led forward by thee, this is synecdoche. Obviously, he doesn't want God to just take my mind and lead my mind. Actually, he's saying that the God should lead the entire person or the entire citizen, and therefore, small part, that is mind, represents the whole part, that is the citizen. So it's synecdoche. And into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. That's personification, because an inanimate object, that is the country, you can't awaken a country. That's a human quality. Waking up is a human quality. So that's personification. Country is giving the human quality of waking up. So that's personification. And finally, it's also apostrophe, because the poet is directly addressing God or Father, who is not there at that point. So since that person or this Father or God which is being referred to is not present there, and the poet is directly talking to this person or Father or God, therefore this is known as apostrophe, which is a figure of speech in this last line. And that concludes all the figures of speech. I hope you enjoyed our analysis of where the mind is without fear. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.